I am a little scared to make this video. Hello, how are you? Welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favorite classic authors. If you are new here, then hello, welcome. My name is Carolyn. So glad that you're here. I am a huge classics lover. I love classic literature. I have been a lover of classic literature for many years now. I have read so many classic books, and there are so many authors that I adore. And it was so hard to make a top 5 favorites list. But I tried picking my top 5 authors that I have read multiple books from. I feel like I'm going to end up making a part 2 to this video because there are just way too many that didn't make the list that I do love so much. I would also love to know what your top 5 favorite classic authors are. I'd be interested to see if any of my favorites are also your favorites. I am also going to be mentioning my top 2 favorite books from these top 5 favorite classic authors. So I would love to know your favorite authors, your favorite books from those favorite authors. So definitely feel free to share that with me. Now, the first author I want to mention is an honorable mention because I wouldn't be here today making this list of favorite classic authors without reading her book. And I've only read one book from her, and she is a sister trio. So there were 3 sisters, and they are the Brontes. So the book that got me into reading classic literature is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It is one of my favorite books of all time. It is truly the reason why I am sitting here today talking to you about classic literature. I love the Bronte sisters, but I have only read one book from each Bronte sister. I have read Jane Eyre from Charlotte, Wuthering Heights from Emily, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall from Anne. They are technically not part of the top 5 because I've only read one book from each author, and I wanted to make the top 5 authors that I have read multiple books from. So I just want to put the Bronte sisters out there because it truly feels wrong for me to not put them in this video. So I am. But if you have not read from the Brontes, I cannot recommend, if you are wanting to get into classic literature, starting with Jane Eyre. It is such an incredible book. It is so easy to read and captivating to read if you're not used to classic literature. It's in first person, which I feel like makes it much more approachable because you are in the headspace of Jane, our main character. If you are, in particular, a lover of romance books and you are getting into literature, maybe you're reading a lot of popular books on TikTok like Colleen Hoover and Emily Henry, I would really recommend reading the Brontes and reading Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre in particular because it's one very big step, I think, not to sound like a literature snob, but I really do think it's one step above those books because it's not just a romance, it is artistry. The artistry behind and in Jane Eyre is undeniable. I can't recommend the Brontes enough. Okay, now we are up to the top 5. These are in no particular order, but very different from the Brontes is an American novelist that I have loved for years. I first read his books in high school. That is Ernest Hemingway. So these are my 2 favorite Ernest Hemingway books. One is fiction, one is nonfiction. We have A Farewell to Arms and we have A Movable Feast. I want to talk to you about A Movable Feast first. So this is his nonfiction book about his time living in Paris in the 1920s. I think that this is a great place to start with Ernest Hemingway if you're unfamiliar with him, because you kind of not only get a taste of who he is as a novelist, but who he is as a person. He led a very interesting life, and I loved hearing about his time in Paris. I have always loved Paris. I've always wanted to visit, and if you guys love the movie Midnight in Paris with Owen Wilson, that is one of my favorite movies of all time. Ernest Hemingway actually plays a role in that movie because it is set in Paris in the 20s, along with a lot of other writers and artists and creative people. That movie is just so great. But A Movable Feast is so approachable. It's nonfiction, but I feel like even if you don't love nonfiction, you will love this book. There's so much beauty, the way that he writes about Paris, the way that he writes about writing, and just I find his life so fascinating. I will admit that I find all authors and creative people's lives fascinating. I am a huge lover of researching about writers and learning more about their personal lives because I think it really deepens the impact of their literature that they created when you understand where they're coming from as a person and as a writer. A great place to start with his fiction, this is my favorite. I think another great place to start though with him is The Old Man and the Sea. But that's the one that I read in high school that really opened up my love for Hemingway. But this one is my personal favorite. It is inspired by Ernest Hemingway's time in World War I as an ambulance driver. So he drove the ambulance when anyone was injured. The main character in this book is also an ambulance driver, and we are following our main character's experience in the war as well as a love affair with a nurse, an army nurse. It's one of those books that when you reach the end, you will feel like there is a pit in your heart and in your stomach. It is one of the endings that will affect you forever. Hemingway's writing is so unique to him. It's unlike any other writer. I feel like I will take that back. The only other writer that gives me Ernest Hemingway vibes is John Steinbeck. He's not in this list, but he is also another writer that I really love. But Hemingway, his writing is very blunt and straightforward, and it's just to the point, and he's so honest. And I just love how he approaches storytelling because he's not here to talk about elusive emotions, but there is so much beauty in his descriptions and in the emotion that is captured in his books. So it doesn't feel like anything is lacking. It just feels like he's being completely honest with you. There is a quote from him where he talks about telling a story and writing, and he says, say one true thing, and then say another true thing, and another true thing. And that is fiction in a way. Like, fiction is truth retold. And I love his approach about writing. I think that he was a fascinating person, and the way that he tells a story is so unique and beautiful and honest. And that's what I love about him. This next writer is very different from Hemingway. She is a Canadian novelist, and she is just a kindred spirit, and that's a hint at who it is, and that is L.M. Montgomery. She is the writer and creator of the Anne of Green Gables series. This is the entire box set from 1 to 8. The first book is, of course, Anne of Green Gables. I just see so much of myself in L.M. Montgomery, her love of nature, her love of wildlife and flowers and the beauty of the natural world and the world around us, and she writes that so beautifully in these books. So we follow Anne. Anne is our main character, and it's just a wonderful coming-of-age story. We follow her from when she is first adopted until she becomes a mother in the later books. And following her life, reading this whole series truly felt like I was watching a friend just live their life. And the connection that I have to these books is so strong because I do feel like Anne is a close friend. I did see so much of myself in her. She is very chatty, she is very clumsy, she makes a lot of mistakes as she grows up, and I feel like she's just very relatable. She is like any child that wants to explore the world. She's very emotional, she's very fiery, and she loves nature, she loves her family and her friends, and she loves the world, and that's what I love about her, is her view of the world. There are so many quotes, there are so many scenes, there are so many parts in this series that have such a special place in my heart, and this series just means the world to me. So I can't imagine not having read it, and if you haven't read it, then I cannot urge you to pick it up enough, not only to read the first Anne of Green Gables book, but the entire series. You will just fall so in love with it, and I hope that Anne feels like a friend just as she feels like my friend. This next author, again, like Ella Montgomery, feels like a friend in a strange way, but also not in a strange way. So many authors feel like my friends. Anyway, that author is E.M. Forster. I first read A Room with a View by E.M. Forster and fell in love with the book, with his writing, and then I went on to read so many more of his books. Another one of my favorites is Maurice, and another one that I have up here is Howard's End. Oh, you can't see it. Howard's End. I also really enjoyed Where Angels Fear to Tread, though it's not one of my favorites, but I wanted to highlight A Room with a View and Maurice because they are my favorites. E.M. Forster, the way that he tells this story, it's so enchanting. When I was reading this, I literally felt like I was in the pages, like I was with the characters, and again, these characters feel so near and dear to me. It feels like if flowers could bloom from pages, or from the pages of certain books, then flowers would bloom from this book. It is just so beautiful. His writing is so, again, like lyrical, but not too lyrical, but there's so much beauty and poetry and romance and love and friendship, and there's just so much beauty in this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. And then Maurice, same thing, same exact thing. This one also kind of has like a dark academia vibe because we are following two students, I believe, they're in Cambridge, and we follow the friendship and love affair between these two men, and it's just an incredibly powerful story. This was published after E.M. Forster's death because he didn't want it published while he was alive because he was gay, and this is obviously a gay romance, or I don't want to call it a romance because I feel like that cheapens it in a way. Not that romance cheapens anything, but it's so much deeper than your typical romance, and it's incredibly beautiful, incredibly heartwarming, heartbreaking. There's so much to this story, and like I said before, I love learning about authors' lives because it deepens the impact of the story. So when you hear that this was so close to E.M. Forster's heart because he was a gay man that couldn't live and love the way that he wanted to because the world and society didn't accept him at the time, that he had to wait until he died to release this book, it's just heartbreaking, and it deepens the impact of this story even more. So again, I love E.M. Forster. There's also another great nonfiction book that he wrote, or I guess released. It's called Aspects of the Novel, and it's a nonfiction about some lectures that he gave either at Oxford or Cambridge. Hearing him talk about literature and the aspects that make up a novel was so fascinating and interesting, and it really felt like I was one of the students in that lecture, and it was so exciting to read. So highly recommend that if you are interested in learning more about literature from a fantastic novelist. So that's one of my favorites. But yeah, E.M. Forster, he's just so great. I would highly recommend starting with A Room with a View if you haven't read any of his books, or if you haven't read A Room with a View, maybe you've read his other books, definitely give A Room with a View a read. I really don't think it's going to come as much of a surprise that I am mentioning this female author because she changed literature. She is just an icon. She is just a literary icon, and that is Jane Austen. I could not put Jane Austen in my top 5 favorite classic authors because she's Jane Austen. She's Jane Austen. So the first Jane Austen book I read was Pride and Prejudice from this exact edition. So this book holds a very special place in my heart. And then I just recently read Sense and Sensibility, and this was actually her first novel, and I adored it so much. Oh my gosh, I love Sense and Sensibility, and I love Pride and Prejudice. These two, just, I could make an entire video about Jane Austen, and maybe I will. Maybe when I finish reading all of her books, because all that I have left is Mansfield Park and Sanditon, which is her, incomplete last novel. She is the creator of so many tropes that is in the romance books of today. Like Pride and Prejudice is one of the first enemies to lovers tropes. Oh my god, she just did so much for literature, and I adore her. Where do I think you should start with Jane Austen? I started with Pride and Prejudice. I think that's a great one to start with. I also feel like Sense and Sensibility is quite approachable, another one of my favorites. So these are probably my top 2, but my top 2 for a while before reading Sense and Sensibility was Pride and Prejudice and Emma. I really, really, really love Jane Austen's Emma. I also love so many of the movie adaptations, so something that I love doing when reading Jane Austen is first watching a movie adaptation and then reading her books, because for me, sometimes I do feel like her writing and the way that she structured her stories can be slightly confusing, especially if you're newer to classic literature. When I first read Pride and Prejudice, I picked it up without having watched any adaptation, and I was very confused. I was also very new to classic literature and very new to Jane Austen's writing. So I was like, I need to put this down. I'll pick it back up maybe after I read more approachable classic books. And then I did. I read more classics, and then I also watched the 2005 adaptation as well as the 1995 miniseries. I think they're both great, and then I read Pride and Prejudice, and that helped me a ton to really just understand who the characters were. It helped me picture them and put faces to the names, and to be able to just navigate the story a little bit easier. But I also think that was due to just being a beginner with classics. So if you are also a beginner, I would definitely recommend watching an adaptation first. I know that that's very controversial. I don't always think that about certain books. Certain books, I feel like you should read the book first and then watch the adaptation. But with Jane Austen, I love watching the adaptations first. Jane Austen just did so much for us, and I will just forever be grateful for her existence. So, Jane Austen. I feel like these kind of actually have been in somewhat of an order unintentionally, because I have saved my favorite classic author of all time for last. I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to many of you who have been here for a while. My favorite author of all time is Leo Tolstoy. He's Leo Tolstoy. I first read the Penguin Little Black Classics edition of How Much Land Does a Man Need and What Men Live By. Those are two short stories that Tolstoy wrote that I first read to really dip my toe into his writing. I knew I wanted to read Anna Karenina, but I was really intimidated by it, so I read those two short stories first to give me a taste of his writing. I really recommend reading a shorter book from an author that has longer books to introduce yourself to their storytelling and their writing. But then I read Anna Karenina and I fell head over heels in love with Tolstoy and with this book. This is my favorite book of all time. I truly think if my house was burning down and I could only save like 5 books, this would be one of them. Which edition of it? I don't know. I have like a million editions of Anna Karenina. But this is the copy that I did my first reread from. I've only read the book twice. I would really love to read it again this year, but I doubt I will have time for that. As you can see, I have annotated the life out of this book, and that is because I would love to analyze every single page, every single sentence, every single word. Like, this is my Bible. How do I even word my love for this book? I truly can't. I have talked about this book endlessly on my channel, and it'll never be enough. It'll never be enough. There are so many parts of this book that I feel like aren't me and aren't relatable at all, but then there are so many parts of this book that are relatable and are me, and I feel like I am in this story. If you're scared to read it, don't be. It's so much more approachable than even I expected when I first picked it up, and then I could not put it down. It is an epic, I guess, family saga, romance. This book is just absolutely everything. Like, it's just everything. Jealousy, romance, love, family, friendship, unrequited love, thinking about religion, thinking about life, thinking about your purpose in the world, thinking about the impact we have on the people around us and our choices, how important our choices are, and how to be a good parent, how to be a good friend, wife. Like, this book is just everything. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about it, so please read it if you haven't. I will stop rambling on. Then the other book I want to mention is, of course, War and Peace. This is a very chonky book. It's huge. I have also annotated the life out of this one. This is another one that just, it truly is life-changing. Like, I think why I adore Tolstoy so much is because these books truly felt like they changed my life. Like, they felt like they changed the way that I viewed the world, the way that I viewed myself, the way that I feel, the way that I experience life, the way that I relate to other people. These books taught me so much about life and so much about How to Be a Good Person. This one is much more focused on war. Obviously, war and peace. We are following the French invasion in 1812, and we are following how that affects all the characters in wartime and in peace times. Reading this book truly felt like it truly felt like a life-changing experience, and I don't know how else to word it. I know this sounds very dramatic, but I'm just being completely honest with you. So yes, Tolstoy is my #1 favorite author ever. I can't recommend these 2 books enough, which is why I never shut up about them and why I'm so passionate about them. I love these authors not only because I love the way that they write and I love their stories, but like I have a need to read them. Like it's one of my life purposes in a weird way, because it changes you and it affects you, and that's the beauty of literature. The books that you read, as well as the people around you, because the characters and the authors are part of that. They are the people around you. They make you who you are, and yeah, I'm just extremely passionate about this, as you can probably tell. I hope that you have enjoyed hearing about my top 5 favorite classic authors. There are so many more that I haven't mentioned that I feel like you're going to comment like, you didn't mention this person, you didn't mention this person. I know. This list was so hard to make, and there are so many other authors that I adore so much. So I will just have to make a part 2 to this video. So let me know, give this video a thumbs up or comment down below if you would like a part 2, if you agree with me about any of these authors, and I would love to know your top 5 favorite authors and your top favorite books from those favorite authors. So don't forget to leave that in a comment below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I will see you very soon in another video, and as always, happy reading.